Welcome to Southwest Florida Frontline, the platform where America's first responders, last responders, and military personnel share their stories. This is your platform to share your story, inspire others, and be heard. The views, experiences, and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual speakers and do not represent the official stance of any affiliated organizations or entities. The information is for general informational purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. We are committed to maintaining the privacy and confidentiality of all guest speakers and participants and adhere to the highest standards of ethical conduct.
Our guest today is Dr. Thomas Coyne, Chief Medical Examiner of District 2 in Tallahassee, Florida.
Southwest Florida Frontline, live from the Sunshine State.
So I now want to come to our category, you can't make this stuff up. I actually learned this while working with you and under you. So what is your most unbelievable or strange case, the one that stood out, the one that was perhaps most gruesome? Is there any case that in particular where you would say that case fits into this category?
I'll tell you this. I mean, we've seen it all, right? I mean, throughout our career, we've seen crazy and incredible things that we think would never, ever happen. Mm-hmm. I know you've been involved in it. Like, you've had like the people that have horrible homicides, decapitations, you name it. I mean, we've seen it. And so it's hard to pick one particular thing. There are things that stand out in my mind, as like crazy experiences. And I still remember them fondly too. Like, cause I think for me was probably back during my time in Miami when I went through training, because I've never experienced anything like this before, right? So, I go through medical school. I've never been to a crime scene before. I've never had to do anything like, anything remotely like this before. So I remember my first crime scene I ever had to go to, which was a crazy crime scene for me, was because it was at an apartment in Miami. And number one, I had to figure out how the hell to get there, because driving around Miami, it's like taking your life into your own hands. I mean, it gets pretty crazy.
Yes.
But me showing up on scene, my little trusty little camera, the area is cordoned off by law enforcement. I got to try to get in there and show them a little badge and say, I'm supposed to be here, let me in. And you get in, and it's just like you see it in the movies in terms of, the evidence tape is all lined out. They have, crime scene is around. They have the area staged. And I remember this particular case was a guy that had gotten a prostitute, and she came over, and apparently he had held her captive, wouldn't let her leave, and her pimp showed up on scene with a couple of other girls and tried to gain access to the guy's apartment. I remember like he had gone around to a window and tried to get into the window, and the guy had a gun and started firing at the pimp from inside the apartment to the window. So that's when the pimp called the police. Police came. There was a bit of a standoff. And then they heard, a few pops. Of course, they then rushed in and found him dead, but the prostitute was also killed. And I get called out to the scene because, in Florida, the body is our jurisdiction. So law enforcement can't touch the body. It's our jurisdiction. So we sometimes would have to get there on scene to help out if we had to move a body for them to get at evidence or to try to, gain access to clothing or so on and so forth. And so for me and my little old inexperienced self, I remember showing up and, that the whole place had been ransacked by the guy. So there was just debris everywhere. Law enforcement had been in there that they actually had fired tear gas canisters. So those were still present in there. And I remember going in and seeing the victim. And I still remember her. She was wearing a white and black dress that was completely covered in blood. She was laying on the floor, sort of like if the wall, it was a room. Her head was in the corner of the wall on the floor, propped up like this, and she had a huge like hunting knife sticking completely through her neck. And I could see blood everywhere, cast off everywhere, multiple stab wounds. And it was just like, wow, like what did I get myself into? I mean, it was the first, crime scene I'd ever been to, so that will always stand out to me. And I remember in the back room, I could see where he was. He had shot himself in the head. He fell back on the bed. So there was those two bodies. And that's when it started. It was like, all right, hey, let's go, and I had a multitude of really interesting scenes after that. For me, it was like, wow, it's my first, stab wound homicide, learning how to, identify different types of stab wounds and trying to understand the instrumentation that comes with it, obtaining evidence from a stab wound, like retrieving a bone that you can then hand a crime scene that they can actually create a mold out of and compare that to the actual, murder weapon, and then, and look at patterns on the knife versus patterns in bone. Really cool stuff that I had never learned about, because in medical school, you learn about medicine, right? And how to diagnose disease. So this was my first experience to this. So it was really cool. Miami was a crazy place. We had over 350 homicides that year. I had numerous homicides. I mean, I had cases of guys that were shot like 65 times in a drive-by shooting, with bullets everywhere, versus, crazy domestic violence cases. You name it. I remember our first day on scene, there was a guy who had, he apparently had a psychotic break, was arguing with a person in his apartment complex, shot that person, then left the apartment complex, went to the balcony of the apartment complex, shot across the street and killed a couple people across the street, went back in and went to several other apartments, killing different people. So you see just unbelievably horrible things, and you have to get over the fact that you're seeing horrible things. Get that out of your mind and look at the evidence and try to see what you're supposed to be seeing, which is, what is on the body here? What evidence is this body presenting to me, so I can better understand how this person died, what took place leading up to that death, and how I can get that information to law enforcement so they can use that to help put together their scene, and better understanding, what happened on scene and how to go about finding the person who committed that act. So I think that once the initial shock is over and you get that out of your system, then it's time to go to work. And I just remember that time as being a crazy year because, moving my family out of New Jersey, getting to Miami, having to navigate Miami, but then also seeing things I've never experienced before in my life. And you get pretty experienced pretty fast. And ever since then, I mean, every year I have crazy cases that, would make you shudder. But to me, the most interesting cases are still the natural cases, the cases that are a true medical mystery that requires me to draw upon all areas of my medical training to find the answer. Those I think are also most satisfying, especially because you can, in terms of the closure you can give the families when you figure something out, and in some cases actually provide knowledge for other family members of an underlying genetic abnormality that they weren't aware existed amongst them as well. So even though this person died, you can still somehow help the living. But yeah, I've had a number of those crazy cases. From a brain perspective, I've had a couple cases. I remember adult and pediatric kids where we thought it was trauma, and it turned out to be a tumor, a previously undiagnosed tumor. And so, you have a law enforcement investigating. You have people who are potentially going to be arrested or be sued for wrongful or wrongdoing when you find out that, their story was true. What was really the driving force behind this person's death was a natural process. So those cases are very satisfying, and probably stick out in my mind too as some of my, if you can call them, more favorite cases.
But in reference to those crazy cases where
Yeah.
People do crazy things to each other or even sometimes to themselves. I mean, we have
Yeah.
seen that too. Things that are actually unbelievable. I
Yeah.
mean, on a professional level, yes, we only collect evidence and we only try to find objective evidence, that helps to find out what happened there and to make a case. But on a personal level, I always found myself asking myself, why, what were you thinking when you did this?
Yeah.
Why didn't you stop? It's think about people who strangle others. I mean, that takes time.
Sure.
The usual mechanism should be at some point, even if you are black out or whatever, that you come back
Yeah.
into consciousness and you stop. And those people do not stop, and they do even more. And
Sure.
that is, from
Yeah.
a psychological point of view, always also very interesting to find out what was going on there and why, the why, the big why behind it.
Yeah. I think how people process emotion is interesting. I think the antisocial personality disorder, person with that sort of sociopathic tendencies is interesting because where you and I have normal human empathy and are introspective and can think about how others feel, there are individuals out there that just do not have that. And do not have a change in heart rate at all when they see or are a part of something, very stressful or like a homicide case. How to me, I mean, seeing someone get killed in front of me or around me would certainly get my heart rate up, get my emotions, all in a tizzy. And I think it's so to me, I think from a biological perspective, I find those individuals interesting, and they're interesting to study too. And there's a lot of them in the community all around us. Variations of that. So, it's amazing when we stop and think about what others, the horrible things that persons can do to each other.
One last question, Tom. Considering all those crazy cases down here in Florida, and that probably gave birth to these social media memes.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as Florida Man?
Yeah, I think there is. I think, but it's an amalgam of stories. I mean, the best stories come out of Florida, and I don't know why that is. I think we truly are a melting pot of persons from all over the world, right? Florida, collects people from everywhere. So that's one reason, I think, right? And I think a warm place is it attracts crazy people, right? I mean, it's.
I don't know. I've lived in Hawaii and it was pretty chilled, actually. And
well, I think it's hard to get to. Hawaii is hard to get to, but there's so many interstates that run right into Florida, right? So maybe that has something to do with it. I have no idea. A lot of tourism, so people are a lot of prey for these crazy predators to prey upon. But yeah, it makes it interesting. I think I think no matter where you work in Florida, you're going to find very interesting cases.
Exactly.
I rather enjoy the Florida Man cases. It makes my life amusing.
Yeah, thank you so very much. That was amazing, very informative.
Oh,
and
my pleasure.
For sharing all this with our audience.
I thank you for having me. I think it's a great format, especially I'll just say this, in my line of work, there's probably about 750 of us in the country. We need probably more than double that just to really handle the case volume that's existing all across this land. So I really hope that more shows like this, or even through television and social media, that people learn about the career of forensic pathology, even those who are in medical school already and who perhaps weren't even thinking about pathology. It's such a rewarding and fun career. I think the great part about it right now is because of the demand, you can find a job almost anywhere in the country. So therefore, you have your pick of where you want to live, what type of environment you want to work in, whether it be rural, whether it be more suburban versus urban. And again, never a dull moment in my life, in terms of the interesting cases I see. So I hope that if anyone is ever interested in this, You can always reach out to me. I'm here at the District 2 Medical Examiner's office. Very easy to find my email online or our office. We have students who come through here and shadow routinely. I think the only way you can truly understand about a profession is to get that visceral experience to see if this is for you. I'm glad you have this venue and this audience, and people, please keep thinking about forensics and reach out to me if you ever want to have that experience.
Thank you. And we will put the contact information of your office in the show notes so that,
great. Thank you very much.
Is there anything else that you would like to say to future forensic people, forensic scientists or pathologists or crime scene X
I can't think of anything specifically other than, I think, just to go back to things that we talked about, maintain your passion, right? Any job, I think, are going to have moments where it gets tough. There are periods that we can't control, like we talked about earlier. This has been a crazy month, and this will be a crazy season for me, as it always is. But it's not emblematic of how my everyday is if you average it across a year. I've had far more rewarding days than I've had stressful days. So just stick with it. Don't forget what got you into this field in the first place. Just keep at it, because we really need all of you. We truly do. And
I want to add, never stop believing in yourself, and don't let other people tell who you are.
Very true.
It's completely up to you. And
well said. Well said.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, a pleasure. It was great speaking with you as well. So,
bye.
Bye-bye.
Your story matters. Reach out to us at SWFLfrontline@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music under @SWFL Frontline.